Today, I have the pleasure of having Will Farnell with me, and Will is going to be talking about what he loves talking about. One of his favorite subjects. He's written a book on it, all about how to build and scale a digital firm. Clearly, things are changing so fast in our industry, and I think Will wrote the book a few years ago, and we were just talking about whether he's going to update it. Perhaps it's time to write a new one. With the pace of changes that take place in our industry, maybe it is time for a new one because things are happening so fast and changing so quickly. To begin with, Will, just give a brief background about yourself, and let's take it from there.
Cool. Thanks for that. And good afternoon, everybody that's watching live, and good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you might be watching on repeat. So as introduction, my name is Will Farnell. I set up a firm called Farnell Clark back in 2007. We're based in Norwich, in Norfolk. And I guess our story really centers around the fact that we were probably one of the first 100% cloud practices globally back in 2009. And anybody that's kind of into cloud tech and everything else has given this impression that the Aussies are kind of way ahead of what we were doing. So I take some pleasure in kind of highlighting the fact that we were doing this quite a long time ago, and have moved through various technology tools in that journey. But I guess it's a combination of tech, but it's not just tech that makes a difference to what we do as a firm and what we've done. We did lots of things that we like to think were fairly kind of innovative and new over the last kind of 13 years or so that I've been running my firm, in terms of the way we deliver client experience, the way we price our services, all of the stuff that I know you talk to your groups about very regularly, Reza. But we're 50 people now in our firm, so we've grown about 35% year on year every year for the last 12 years. So I have some war stories.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. So let's try and piece this apart to try and make it relevant and useful for the listeners. So to begin with, clearly you're a pioneer. You were doing this 10 years ago, like you said, when perhaps many others weren't. There are accountants at different stages of the journey, but I'd like to think that most people listening are already on the cloud journey. They're using the likes of Xero, QuickBooks, etc. They've got different add-ons. Tell us what it's like at the moment in your firm. So I just want to get a feel of, what is the setup like? What does a digital firm look like at Farnell Clark at the moment? And then we could talk about, where do you think it's heading before we start to go back into perhaps, the growing pains and start to kind of give some takeaways to the viewers.
Sure. So I think the first point is that the whole concept, I think, of a digital firm is about evolution. So we don't stand still. We want to be at the forefront of innovation in terms of what we do, not only with technology, but I was talking to a firm earlier on today, actually, and we were talking about kind of the critical moments. And I think some of the critical moments for me in my firm was really getting structure right. There's so much that hinges on structuring your team in the right way to deliver the kind of service that you want to deliver to clients, and really build on the concept of delivering real client experience. It's kind of this challenge that we're really fortunate as accountants in that we have the benefit of this thing called gross recurring fees, that mean as long as we don't screw up, clients keep coming back. But you've got to, on the downside, it kind of can make you really complacent in terms of there's no aspiration to deliver something really unique. But the world's competitive. We're in a really competitive marketplace now, and it's much easier for clients to find what they're looking for. So we have to kind of constantly strive to use our people, which is really, really important, to deliver a point of difference. Because when we get to the point where everybody's using Xero, QuickBooks, Receipt Bank, auto entry, whatever it is, we start to all look the same again. Mm-hmm. And you have to go back kind of 20 years to a point at which all accountants kind of look the same, did the same, charged the same.
Yeah.
And there's a risk that we get back to that if we don't think about what we do. So evolution, innovation is still critical, structure is key, and still not being afraid to try new technology, but not technology for the sake of using technology that's going to make a real impact to what we do for clients on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. No, you raised some very valid points. You're right. It's all about differentiation. How can we differentiate ourselves from others? What sets us apart from the others? What new heights can we take client experience to? So talk to me a little about the structure you have going at Farnell Clark. What kind of structure have you used to scale up to the 50 people that you have now?
So we did what most firms do. So when you grow, you start to have to think about structure, and we went through a kind of a cycle almost, in terms of, I got to about 8 or 9 people, and we started to think, well, how best do we structure this, in terms of, do we have somebody that does tax and somebody else that does bookkeeping and somebody else that does payroll, somebody else that does accounts? And we moved to that kind of very traditional service line structure. And the problem I got is that clients would say, I don't know who to talk to. I used to talk to Will, and Will doesn't want to talk to me anymore, and I don't know who I need to go to. So we then said, we've got to tackle that. We've got to find a way to have a single point of contact. So we went down what we called at the time an account handler kind of model. So every client had a point of contact. The mistake we made there is we pitched it too junior. So then we relied too much on more junior members of staff that perhaps didn't have the experience to know what was important, what was ultra important, and what was kind of, well, that can wait a day or two. And we still had challenges in terms of clients not being responded to. So we said, we've got to pitch it at a higher level. So we then went out and started to recruit what we call client managers, who are much more capable of understanding what's a priority and so on. And that evolved into what we have today, which is what we refer to as a pod structure. Again, evolution, we're changing it again at the moment. But if I talk about where we were kind of 3 months ago, because it kind of works, we had teams of 4, and each pod has client relationships, and they do everything for the client with the exception of payroll. So accounts, personal tax, corporation tax, any business advisory work, bookkeeping, it's all done within the pod. Again, if you're going, I'm a big advocate of daily bookkeeping. We'll put that out there. I know you've had various conversations on that in the past, and it's a key part of our model, and the pod underpins the success of that model. So we've got people in that pod that are processing transactions on a daily basis for our clients. We average 4 minutes per day per client in terms of daily bookkeeping. And the pod gives us the ability to do that. And what it means in terms of the way we organize the business is that every pod can deliver about £250,000 in revenue. So if you're looking at scaling, it's a great model for scale, because all you do is you bolt a new pod on. So when you hit 250, you create another pod. And it gives you the ability to very easily scale, because the thing is, it's really easy to grow an accounting firm. It's much harder to scale an accounting firm, as you'll know. So it's easy to find the work. It's much harder to deliver it successfully, consistently, and in an efficient manner. And that's where the pod structures kind of really help. And we keep personal tax in terms of private clients or traders sit in a pod of their own, essentially. So we're focused on our core kind of corporate businesses in terms of limited companies and the ancillary services that we deliver to them within that pod structure.
Fantastic. No, it's very interesting concept. So on this, what are the kind of the pain points would you say you've had with building a pod structure? So when you bring on, say one pod is exhausted and you need to then go out and recruit a new pod, do you kind of have to recruit all 4 individuals at the same time to then service the new clients? Or, how do you meet that challenge when you are scaling? And also the issue of, the skill set, because then you've got to have, each pod has to have some personal tax experience, some accounts experience, some, VAT experience. How do you go about meeting the recruitment challenges of that? Or do you have in-house training that can help to kind of bridge that gap if people don't have those skill sets?
Yeah, great question, and it kind of opens up one of the other areas that obviously there's lots of conversation around in terms of the pros and cons of offshoring and outsourcing. We've made a very conscious decision that we've never gone down the offshoring outsourcing route, and I think if you have clarity over what your growth aspirations are, kind of succession planning, career development is absolutely critical. We're fortunate in terms of the growth that we've consistently delivered, means that we have an ability for our teams to grow, and we've got people that are kind of getting close now to taking on client manager roles, having come in as kind of AAT apprentices 5-6 years ago. So I think succession is really important. I think in terms of the pods, what we would generally do is when we get to capacity, we have a number of options. We might have people that are ready to go straight into a pod. We might take a 4-person pod down to a 3-person pod to start another pod. But we know what the structure is. We know what the roles are within those pods. So it's basically a client manager, a senior, and 2 trainees is the way the pod's structured. So our client managers are probably 3 years post-qualified. Seniors are kind of final stage ACCA, AAT qualified with 3 years practice experience. And then we've got a couple of AAT trainees that make up the pod. So there's clarity in terms of the roles. There's buddying. So when we bring in a new trainee, they've got a buddy there that they work with who's perhaps 18 months into their training. So it kind of looks after itself, which is great. The team get flexibility in terms of the type of work they're doing, bit of bookkeeping, bit of VAT, bit of accounts, and so on. So I think it's being confident in your ability to grow, and then being really focused on ensuring that you're really clear with career progression opportunities. When we were much earlier in our growth, I remember a particular time very clearly, very vividly. It was 2015, and we lost our first bunch of staff, and we lost 6 staff in the period of 8 weeks. And it was almost like a domino effect. So one went, and it was like, hey, it's okay to leave, and there was like this exodus to the door, and I kind of struggled with it for some time in terms of what did I do wrong, what happened, and when we started to talk to people about the reasons they were moving on, they said things like, I can't see any career progression. And bearing in mind, this is a firm that at this point was, I don't know, 25 staff. We were growing 40% a year. And I'm sitting there as the owner thinking, you guys are meant to kind of be intelligent trainee accountants here. And you can't see that with this growth, there's going to be career progression opportunities. And it was my fault. Of course, it was my fault. I was the business owner. I wasn't communicating and articulating the vision. I wasn't clearly articulating where we were going as a firm. We weren't really doing performance appraisal. We didn't have competency frameworks. So we hadn't sat down and said to people, look, if you want to do this role, these are the skills you've got to develop. Here's a plan to do it, and this is how we're going to help you do it. So it's really, really important that you take the time to communicate what you're trying to achieve, what the opportunities are for the people in your firm, because you can't leave people to make that assumption themselves, however clever they are. It's they've got to understand where they fit, what the potential is, what the opportunities are.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good points there. I've got a question coming in from Neil. If you have a question, please do put them in the comments. That's what we're here to answer. So Neil is asking, Will, can you please explain the scenario around your first hire? What turnover were you? How many clients did you have, etc.? What triggered the action to look for your first employee? So yeah, I think there's quite a few people are here in a similar position as Neil. So I think that would be quite useful if you can kind of go back to those days when you first thought, yeah, I need to get someone in to help me. How soon did that happen?
So the very first person I hired was somebody to do payroll, it's still something that I look back on and is a kind of indicator of the type of approach that I wanted in the firm from very early on. And it would have been 2008. It was at a time when it was director payrolls were, you could file an annual pre-RTI. So end of the year, you'd say, yeah, director took this much money. But I wanted to send a pay slip to every client every month. And the reason I wanted to do that is it creates a touch point. So it creates a client touch point. Now, I didn't have time to kind of email, I don't know what it was, maybe Neil was asking about number of clients. I would have thought we were probably at about 60 clients or so at that point. I didn't want to have to keep sending 60 pay slips a month. So I took somebody on part-time to help me with payroll and a bit of admin to let me focus on the stuff that I needed to be doing in terms of doing the work, but also developing new business. And Vicky came on and did payroll for us, and she'd send a pay slip and a client would email back and say, hey, thanks for the pay slip, Vicky. Oh, and by the way, can you help me with this? So instantly we were creating kind of client touch points when we didn't have to. It was proactivity that everybody says, hey, we're proactive accountants. Really, what do you do? And sending a monthly pay slip isn't overly proactive, but actually when you look at what most do, it kind of is. But it creates an engagement with the client. I then took on a couple of part-time people in fairly quick succession, a couple of years in, by which point we were probably doing about getting on 400k revenue. So not huge numbers. Both came in part-time initially, both ended up becoming full-time employees, and it went from there. And generally our firm has doubled in size every 3 years as a broad rule. That's in terms of revenue and staff headcount.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully that answers your question, Neil. Just to follow on from that, Will, I mean, a lot of accounting firm owners, sole practitioners are fearful of hiring, of making that investment into bringing on additional team members to help them to grow. What kind of mindset, if you remember what it was back then, what kind of mindset did you have, and what kind of, I guess, it's confidence, right? The belief in yourself that you were going to grow, that you wanted to take the firm places, that allowed you to then say, yeah, I need to bring somebody on board to help me out with this because I can't do everything. What would you kind of, I guess, say to firm owners in that situation where they're teetering between, should I take someone on, should I not? What if I don't manage to bring on board the business to sustain the additional members that I've employed now? So yeah, do you want to add something on that?
Yes, I think the belief in what you're doing is key. And I think if you make a conscious decision of where you want to be, that's half the battle. So knowing that by that point, this is the level of business that I want to deliver, that this is the number of people I want. And I think whilst I had a broad view of that, one of the mistakes I made very early on is making an assumption that the growth was going to slow, because I was a new business and we were doing, I don't know, year 1 to 2, we kind of did 100% growth, and it's like, well, yeah, of course that's going to happen because I'm a new business and we're doing something a bit different. It's going to slow down. And we moved offices 4 times in 5 years, because I didn't expect the growth to continue at the rate that it did. But I think it's the entrepreneurial spirit, and you have to be prepared to take a risk. If you don't take the risk, you're not going to grow. it's kind of almost that black and white. If you don't take on that extra member of staff, then you're consciously thinking or unconsciously thinking about, well, I can only do so much, I've only got so many hours, or I'm going to kill myself doing 100 hours a week. So you're creating limitations on your ability to grow. So if you've started a firm and you're 12 months in and you've got 50 clients, you can grow an accounting firm because you've got 50 clients in a year. And it gets easier because the more clients you've got, the more critical mass you've got, the more referrals you get. And a good friend of mine once said to me that whilst we shouldn't rely on referrals, if you as an accounting firm are not getting 70% of your new business from referrals, stop and look very closely at what you're doing, because what it means is you're not doing a very good job. So there's something not working. If 70% of your new business isn't coming from referrals, something isn't working in your firm. Because the start point is you satisfy the clients you've got, they're going to go and tell somebody else. So we can't sit back and just rely on referrals. We know that, but equally, most of your business should be coming from referral. So the more clients you've got, the more referrals you get, the more clients you get, and it's the snowball. It's topical at the moment, looking out the window, just kind of builds. But if you don't resource for that growth, you have problems. And equally, when you start growing, if you don't resource for that growth fast enough, that causes problems too. And then one of the other challenges that we had is we also weren't pricing right. We thought we were really, really clever doing fixed fees and having everybody pay us on monthly. It's a great model as long as you remember to review it every year. And we went 8 years and didn't review it and got to a point where it's like, we've got a problem here because we haven't got the resource to service the clients we've got, and we can't afford to take on new resource because we're not charging enough. That's kind of a really dangerous place to be, and something has to give in that situation, because it's a circle and a loop, and you get caught in it, and it's really hard to get out.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you about client experience, but if we just stay on the topic of pricing, given that you've raised it. So at what point did you kind of say to yourself, right, I need to really get a handle on this. I need to sort out my pricing. What did you do? How did you go about it? And what kind of systems in place do you have now to ensure that you are pricing for, the value that you're generating?
Yeah. So day one, part of the vision of Farnell Clark was that I had the benefit of not training in practice, so I had no preconceptions about how to run an accounting firm. So therefore, I started with a blank sheet of paper and said, "Hey, I'm a client. What do I want?" And one of those things was, I want to know what I'm paying for. I want to know what I get for what I pay for. So the whole idea of fixed fee pricing in 2007 was kind of fairly novel. It wasn't something that lots of people were doing. People were still time recording. They were charging by the hour. And I said from day one, it's a fixed fee. You're going to pay it monthly. In the days before go cardless, can you imagine kind of clients paying by standing order? And if you cast your mind back around about 2009-10, we had 3 VAT rate changes. And the problem with standing orders is the client has to change it. So I think as recent as 2 years ago, we had somebody still paying a 17.5% VAT on their standing orders. But so fixed fee was kind of a key approach for us from day one. And I thought I'd kind of done a good job in terms of getting clients to sign up. We gave them a monthly fee. They paid us monthly eventually when they signed up to the standing order. And it was really easy because the money came in every month. It led us into lots of false senses of security because people were paying before we did the bulk of the work. So you'd think, this is great. Money's coming in and we're surviving on our 4 members of staff. Then you had to do the work, and it was like, I've got a problem now because we need to go out and recruit some people to deliver all this work. And then you'd feel like there's only just enough cash coming in, and then the cash would start building again as you took on new clients. And this is that point about not planning your resource far enough in advance and planning for that growth, because we got into a situation where we were desperate to recruit, which meant we recruited wrong people. That created a whole bunch of other challenges that we might get onto. But clients paid every month, so you kind of forget about it. You sign up a client and your focus is then on the new clients that are coming in. So you might change your pricing for the new clients, but you ignore the old clients. You don't ignore the old clients, but you know what I mean? You don't revisit what they're paying. And literally we went 8 years before we actually sat and thought, hang on a second, all these clients that we priced 8 years ago, we've never changed their price. And the best example I use regularly to highlight how dangerous this is I took on a client in 2008. They were a partnership. We incorporated them. We sold them what, of course, I thought they wanted to buy, which was compliance, because that's kind of the view that many accountants have of they don't want to buy advisory, so we'll just tell them and present a package to them for the things that they have to have and not the things that they might want to have, but that's another topic. So we quoted them at £125 a month, whatever the figure was. When I reviewed their fees 8 years later, they were turning over 1.6 million. They had 34 staff that we were doing the payroll for, and they were still paying me £125 a month.
Wow.
They were delighted, naturally, and clearly it was an interesting conversation. But you might be surprised to know that they were happy to pay us more money when we had the conversation with them. But that's the point. If you go down a route of fixed fee and monthly billing, you've got to build in a process to make sure that you tackle it. So fast forward 2015, we started to see real challenges in the firm. We'd grown very, very quickly, and we kind of hit a wall. And this cycle that I mentioned a moment ago in terms of client delivery was beginning to suffer. Externally, we were the shining light. 2016, we won 3 awards at the British Accountancy Awards for Best Firm East of England, Best Most Innovative Firm, Independent Firm, and we also won Most Innovative Firm overall, and we beat Deloitte and PKF Cooper Parry to win that award. It was our worst year as a business when we won those awards. So externally, we were doing great stuff. Internally, we were hamsters and we were running really fast on a wheel to just keep up. And our focus was trying to keep clients happy. We ignored what was going on internally in the business, and it couldn't go on, and we had to fix it. And we went through a process over probably 3 years that was completely rebuilding our firm. So we brought in our MD, who wasn't from accounting. He started life as a management accountant, but ended up in kind of operations management type roles because we needed somebody to fix stuff. And fees was the first thing we had to fix. So we went through a process over 2 years of repricing our entire client base, or our limited company client base, which was about 600 clients at that point in time. And we did fee reviews across the whole 600 clients. And over the years running up to this, I'd been working with a mentor and a bunch of other people had said to me, you got to put your prices up. And I'd say, yeah, but I can't because the service isn't good enough. We can't afford to lose the clients. Even if we're not making any money on them, we need the cash flow. So I created all these excuses and was constantly told, you won't lose your clients. They won't go. Just have the conversations. And we did. And I think over the first year, we put, or over 2 years, we put 150 grand on our bottom line through fee increases, through price increases. In year 1, out of 600 clients, we lost 12. We worked out we could have lost a third of our client base if the other 2/3 paid the right fee. So we could have made the same amount of money with 400 clients as we were making with 600 clients if the 400 that stayed paid the right fee. So the interesting point as well, of course, is that the 12 that we lost, guess what? They're the ones that would probably have crossed off anyway. So It worked. I mean, that's the point. It was a painful exercise. It was a time consuming exercise. We had to do most of it by email as well, because you can't have 600 face-to-face conversations with people about fees. Some of the more contentious ones we had conversations with, but broadly it was done on email. And some of it was just, hey, look, it's 6 years since we last put your fee up, and since then you've taken on X number of new staff, you've got turnover's grown, the fee's got to go up. And clients accepted it. Now we have a process, and we review fees in the run up to year end. So what are we now? We're February, so we're now beginning to start thinking about April year end clients, what their fee review is going to be, what their new fee is going to look like for their next financial year. And we're using 𝐬𝐭𝐡 for pricing. We're actually using a bit of a chunk of systems, but 𝐬𝐿 gave us the structure to rethink our pricing. We constantly tweak it. It's evolving in terms of how we use it, but it's really, really important. And I think the key thing with pricing isn't a case of people get pricing wrong, they get management of scope wrong, and that leads to poor pricing, because they do stuff that's out of scope and don't charge for it, or don't charge enough for it. And that's the bigger problem, that whether it's 𝐬𝐿, whether it's Practice Ignition, it just gives you the ability to manage scope. And if you can manage scope, pricing becomes much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you've raised some very valid points there. And the one about the, not appreciating that even if you put the prices up for your clients by X percentage, even if you lose, like you said, a third of them, you'd still be making more money, or at least break even. And it's funny how, we as accountants, we learn all this in our exams. We learn about break even analysis, but we ourselves can't come to terms with actually putting the numbers through on a spreadsheet to say, even if I put my prices up by 30%, what percentage of customers can I afford to lose to remain in the same place as I am now? And I mean, I do this exercise with business owners when I'm talking to them about their pricing, but equally, we as accountants should be doing it on our own portfolios, because the numbers are just staggering. And it means that you can actually afford to lose a large chunk, which means that you won't be doing as much work and still be making the same level of profit. So yeah, if you're listening and you haven't done your break-even analysis on how much you can afford to increase your prices by and what level of customers you can afford to lose, go and do that now. So Will, talk to me about, clearly you have a focus on client experience. So what tangible takeaways can we give the audience? What are you doing on client experience? How are you ensuring that you are now delivering great client experience to ensure that clearly clients stay for the long term and recommend and refer you on to their friends and family?
Yeah, so I think the first point is understanding what we mean by client experience, and for me, it's how do we make a client feel, and I think that's the distinction, isn't it? We can talk about client service, and for me, delivering good client service is what we refer to as a critical success factor. If you don't do it, you don't have any clients. So it's the stuff we've got to do just to stay in business. It's not the stuff that's going to give you a competitive advantage over all of the other accountants within. It doesn't even matter what radius they're in anymore, because we work with clients all around the country, and we've got international clients as well. So experience is the bit that creates the differentiator. So how do you impact the way you make a client feel? And when we talk about client experience, we're talking about the sum total of every touch point of that client, from the point that you kind of engage with them through content or whatever, to the point that they move on or whatever they do. So the first point is the sum of that is going to be greater the more you have. So touch points are critical. So some of the stuff that we do, we spent a lot of time looking at onboarding, and we have what we call a welcome team that works with new clients for the first 3 months in terms of setting expectations, educating them on the way we work and the systems that we use, what we expect from them, what they get from us, and so on, making that relationship work. For me, it's about how do we increase the number of touch points, it comes back to daily bookkeeping again. So for me, the experience starts with what we do for them on a daily basis. We position it to clients as a weekly service, because what we don't want is to set an expectation that we're going to chase them every day for the £2.20 they spent on their debit card, because it just kind of would probably irritate people. But we're processing their transactions on a daily basis, and as part of that onboarding, we're encouraging them to send stuff to us as they get it. So what we're doing on a weekly basis is we're following up with those clients for missing information. It means we give them live data. It also means we have a conversation with them once a week, whether that be by email or we pick the phone up. That creates great relationships. And when you have great relationships with clients, you get to understand what keeps them awake at night. You get to understand their pain points, their aspirations, their goals, all the things that are important to enable you to over deliver almost. I know we don't want to over deliver when we're not charging for it, but there's also an element of that over delivery is about the experience that we're creating. We want people to say, yeah, they go the extra mile. That's kind of how, one of the ways we're going to measure that. But you take the fact that we position our bookkeeping as weekly, but we're doing it every day, so instantly we're over servicing. But it means that the client can log up. They've done that already. It's all, the bank's reconciled. I know where I'm at. I know that Fred paid me yesterday, or whatever it might be. But it creates the opportunities for those kind of broader advisory conversations that we want to have. And we measure NPS. So NPS is kind of fairly critical in terms of where we sit, and it's one of those ways that we get a benchmark, because it's really subjective in terms of asking clients for feedback. But at least with NPS, while it's a fairly high level indicator, it's something that you can benchmark. So you know that if you've got a positive number, hey, you're doing okay. But last time we did our NPS score, we were 77. 72. Starbucks is 77. Apple is 72. So we were on par with Apple, which is great. So clearly we're doing something right. So getting that understanding of how clients kind of see you're performing. NPS gives you a measure to say, are we going up, are we going down? When we introduced some of our flexible working stuff a couple of years back, that was directly linked to NPS, because when we said to our staff, hey guys, you can work when and how you want, and you can take as much holiday as you want, as long as the client's delighted. That's the catch at the end of it. So how do we make sure the client remains delighted? If our NPS score dropped, we'd have had to revisit and say, hey guys, this isn't working, because clients are not as satisfied now as they were 12 months ago. So something isn't working in the way that you're managing your resource. So how do you make a client feel? Regular touch points, and asking them how you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you use to do your NPS scores, and how often? And do you find it's the same ones that respond every time? And how do you make sure that you can get higher coverage amongst your client base rather than the same people responding every time?
So I think familiarity is with the concept is the main thing at the moment. It's kind of an annual thing. I mean, we talk about different ways we can perhaps do it on a more regular basis. We recently took on a head of marketing that's going to be looking at how we can embed it more into process. I think it's always going to be fairly subjective in terms of the response rates you get. I think our last one, we got about 23% response rate, which actually is pretty good for NPS. It's generally around about the 15% mark. So that's good. But I think it's consistency, getting people understanding why you're doing it, doing it at a regular enough interval that people don't, what are they asking that for? It's got to be part of what you do, and it can be really easy. We just did it with MailChimp, and took the numbers and plugged it into a calculator, and it does the calculation for you. But it's not a difficult calculation anyway. So it's a fairly straightforward metric to use, but it's really powerful because it gives you that, yes, we're better than we were last year or better than we were last quarter. However you do it, it gives you a benchmark and the ability to be able to say, if Starbucks is 77 and Barclays Bank's 14, whatever it might be, you get an idea of where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I can agree with you all. We do a similar thing. We actually use SurveyMonkey, and they've got the calculation in there. So when it goes out by SurveyMonkey, they do the calculation for you, which helps to kind of just get that number. But yeah, I totally agree. To get your employees' mindsets linked to the outputs that they're delivering rather than inputs, and that then helps them focus their efforts on the right things rather than just inputs on a timesheet, and then they think they've done work, but actually what is the output, what is the benefit that a client has got from what they have done that day. So just a few minutes left, Will. We should close up by Q2. Just so lastly, just what are your views on the future? Where do the next 5 years do you think will be, and where will you be? Where are you kind of taking your firm in the next 5 years, just to kind of leave that as food for thought for our audience today?
Yeah. So I think if we just take something you mentioned very early on in this session, in terms of the people that are likely to be watching this are going to be on the cloud journey. My own view of adoption at the moment is that we're still only at about 20% adoption. So anybody that is already doing this stuff in their accounting firm is already in the top quartile of firms in the UK. Many other countries are behind that. You take US, Canada, they're behind that 20%. Last time I spoke to somebody that had reasonable knowledge of it, Australia was at about 50% adoption. So this is in terms of end user adoption, which translates quite nicely into accounting firm adoption. And you take something like Receipt Bank, somebody might be using Receipt Bank, and therefore they're in Receipt Bank's partner numbers of about 10,000 partners globally. There's 34,000 accounting firms in the UK. So even if we said 7,000 of Receipt Bank's partners are UK, that's still only 20% of the UK market. And that's somebody that's a partner. And you can be a Receipt Bank partner if you're paying them 199 quid a month or whatever the current figure is. You might have 300 clients, but 10 of them are using Receipt Bank. So does that really mean you're doing cloud accounting? No, it doesn't. So the first point is, don't undervalue where you are on the journey in comparison to the majority of accounting firms in the UK that are still nowhere near it yet. So you are still early adopters is point one. So where is it going? The rest of the market are going to catch up, but equally, I think it's really important we start to look at the convergence of banking and accounting general ledgers, and where that's going to go. QuickBooks in the US have QuickBooks Live, which is their bookkeeping platform, where they're using their pro advisors to deliver bookkeeping services. They also have QuickBooks Cash, which is a bank. So Intuit will pay their users 1% interest on money that they have in their QuickBooks bank account. It gives them the ability to lend money. Free Agent in the UK is owned by NatWest. And there's convergence there. They're giving Free Agent away to NatWest RBS bank customers. You've got Counting Up and Coconut that are essentially a banking tool with bookkeeping functionality in the app that is, at some point in the future, I'm sure, going to give users the ability to file their tax returns. So if your focus is on the lower end of the sole trader market, you have significant risk facing you in the coming years. And that means that people are going to want to move up the food chain. So those accountants that are heavily reliant on self-employed sole traders are going to say, well, actually, you know what, I need to move up and start working with limited companies, smaller limited companies. We've got IR35 that's going to wipe out a whole load of contractors, freelancers from the self-employed space. So I guess what I'm saying is that there is huge pressure that's kind of converging on us in terms of what has been our bread and butter money for a long time. So we have to be really conscious, coming back to things like client experience. what do we deliver? How do we perform above our local competition? What are the opportunities for us to delve deeper into the client relationship in terms of other things that we can deliver for our clients? So fascinating 5 years ahead. The changes that I've seen over 10 years pale into insignificance compared to what we're going to see in the next 5 in terms of the impact that technology has on what we do as accountants.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Will, for sharing those words of wisdom, and no doubt lots of change for us ahead. I hope you find that useful. If you're listening, let us know if there's any questions. Feel free to put them in. I think Will's in the group now, so he'll be happy to answer them, I'm sure. You're probably wondering why on earth have I brought Will on, because we're perhaps maybe seen as competitors because we both offer mentoring to accountants, but I come from a very abundant mindset here, in that, the more people that are sharing their stories, sharing their journeys about what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, so that you can learn from someone who's been in your footsteps, then the better. So Will, if people want to find out more about what you do, what should they do? Where should they go?
So by all means, have a look at what we're doing at Farnell Clark. So it's 𝐴𝐴𝐼𝐶 with an e.co.uk, and the work that I do with software vendors is all at willfarnell.com. And connect with me on LinkedIn. Always happy to share. And likewise, we lots of us that are working with accountants in the space have different experiences, different perspectives. And I think it's really useful to share those. So I really appreciate the offer to come and chat with you, Reza. Thank you.
Very welcome. That's great. No, it's great how we have this collaborative environment amongst accountants these days, which 10 years ago was unheard of. So if you're listening, then make the most of it. Make the most of these Facebook groups or LinkedIn, connecting with other accountants, sharing your ideas, supporting each other, and together, like Will said, we are kind of early adopters already. So let's keep that momentum going. Let's keep evolving, innovating for the betterment of our clients and their futures and our futures ultimately as well. So I hope you found that useful today. Thank you so much for attending this session, and have a great week, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye for now.